Oh, all the comrades there I had are sorry for my country. Occupy climate war. Hip hip, hippity boy. Brothers and Broadway, not against the joy. Hip hip. One Head, Many Hats is a nonlinear story. It's my own experience mixed with social history and personal history. And as I'm in the space, I start to register that I'm performing for them and for me. And then the piece gets kind of squeezed out of me under the pressure of the performance. It incorporates songs from many different spaces in my life, and the music and the sound is a segue for me into the movement, how the words sound can incite or create a certain kind of movement. And then I'm interested in how that impacts my memory and how I can play inside of it with the pacing and change it. And then dreaming came up. So, but when I started doing this piece, I realized that this piece was, my father died about 3 years ago. I was dealing with his death. Inside my father's head, hundreds of stories whirled about. A tumor the size of a grapefruit grows. Then there's a social history that's sort of dealing with, because I feel like when we're dealing with our own story, we're also dealing with whatever else is going on around us. So for me, especially when I was creating that piece, it was drones, and I was reading about children being killed, inadvertently, collateral damage. But that idea was insane to me. You shouldn't be able to press a button and kill a child. That was coupled with these stories of death with my father and then my grandfather. And what I realized with my grandfather was that he had fought in World War II. He talked about bombing off target on Sunday. He was in a plane and he dropped bombs and didn't know what happened. And he dealt with that the rest of his life. And for all of us, whether we want to talk about it or not, that's sort of continually in the space. War. And in the end, all that stuff gets combined with this idea of the short period of time we have to live and experience things. Yeah. So the very end is the piece is a breath out, and I leave the audience, right? And for me, that's sort of a symbolic, okay, we had a moment to share the story, and now it's shifted on to another space. So I opened the piece with this capoeira song, this traditional song about being by the water. That's not part of my direct cultural heritage, but as artists, you can be taught by many different people that are not your direct blood lineage, right? Or your history, or where you came from. All of a sudden you have this opportunity to share things over ideas. And then you have a lineage that's apart or in conjunction with your with where you came from. So I started with that song, and then I come to the center of the stage and I go upside down and all the change drops out of my pockets. And for me, that's the beginning of a dream. And then the end for me was the parting glass, and that comes back from the memory of the ensemble training and work with my father, because that was one of the songs that was shared in that body of work. And it's about leaving. It's about dying and moving on. And you share a toast, and then one person departs. I'm going down the street on a bus. Slushy streets, wet feet hustling by in a rush. It's nonlinear. It shouldn't be followed as if it's telling a very specific story that you catch every word. And what distinguishes it from other work is that there's people that might come and see it from a dance perspective and say, well, that's not, where's the line, where's the form? And people in theater will come and maybe ask about the story or the text. For me, what's important is that I'm mixing it all. And I keep it alive for myself when I'm doing it. As it is, next time I do it, it will be different. Because what it means is not to be talked about, it's to be felt. It's how it impacts you. Without words, like words are almost irrelevant, you know? It's like dreams in that way. You're in the process of a kind of communication. And then afterwards, you make sense of it.
Swallow me. Swallow me.
I have in the past defined myself as a movement artist because I was performing with really trained dancers. So I became very interested in how bodies work together. How do bodies, you know, are they focused on a single point of contact? Are they never in contact? Are the whole bodies enveloping each other? That became a real interest for me. So touch. When do bodies touch? Kinetic versus potential. It's the space across people versus the physical connection and touch between people. So the ensemble training that I received when I was in high school was from a program that was taught by my father. And he didn't provide a specific technique, like a dance technique or an acting technique. He taught presence, how to become present, what's important when you're in communication. And that crossed over between dance and theater. How to generate something and offer it to a group and create something with a group. That became a really important way for me to look at the way I did things. And it really informed my own idea about the connection between breath and movement and a way of looking at the world. And then I was exposed to contact improvisation and capoeira. Contact improvisation is an art form about connection and touch. Capoeira is an art form from the African diaspora that's about moving in and around each other, outside each other's spaces. The other side of it is that contact improvisation comes out of a cultural rebellion. It comes out of too much control of the body and bodies not touching one another. So there's this beautiful thing that Steve Paxton initiated and then other people have taken on or been part of, that is what's happening inside the body. What's happening on the subconscious level. In terms of a link to capoeira, it's built on responding to another person. And contact improvisation is the same thing, because they're both dealing with bodies, how they relate to one another, and improvising off of impetus, what that person gives you. You don't just go up and do your own thing. So in that way, the forms are really very much related. I think things exist in cycles. And this is repeated in many different religions and many different faiths and spiritual ideas or origin myths of the world. But it's just repeated in the way we live. It goes back to that breath. That's why the breath is so important for me. The inhale is different from the exhale. But they only exist together. But I always considered, what if our life is no more and no less than one breath? An inhale and an exhale. A cycle. And that also goes into my philosophy of performing. Is that you are doing something that's live communication. It's temporal, it's contained in time, and it's ephemeral, it's fleeting and it's momentary, but it touches something that's eternal. It opens up a world that resonates a little bit with not just this moment right here, but something that's much, much bigger. So the cycle of the day, the cycle of the breath, the cycle of the ocean, the cycle of the year. These are all cycles, and now when you start really disjoining them, that's dealing with sort of modern way of looking with life over top of that very present and real cycle that we all live in. So I think that's part of what my expression is sort of that frustration of, how does the linear and the cyclical, how do you make sense of the two of them together? And that's why I keep on working on it.
Filled, covered, layered, lost, And all the sweethearts here I had would wish me one more day to stay. But since it falls into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I will gently rise.